Hello, my name is Marielle Remillard. I'm a member of SustainUS, and I'm the Citizen Science Coordinator this year. And I'm going to be talking to you about what is the future of climate science. Young people have been attending the United Nations climate negotiations for several years. We actually started having youth involvement in UN environmental processes in the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit in 1992. And since then, we've gained quite a showing for youth involvement and have had more than 1,000 youth at the Copenhagen COP15 last year. So how do young people contribute to this? Today is the Young and Future Generations Day, and youth have a specific role to play within the environmental negotiations. One of the things they do is they talk with decision makers and share visions one-on-one. They work together to strategize and plan platforms and events. They carry out demonstrations. They are involved with the Fossil of the Day, highlighting which organizations, which countries are not being conducive to the climate change process. And they organize actions and direct responses and motivate people to work together for a binding treaty. So the youth throughout the conference can be seen working together, sometimes against the odds, to shed light on the more pressing issues of climate change, and they're working to seek solutions. So today I'm here to introduce 4 panelists who work not only here at the COP meetings, but outside of the meetings to find real solutions to climate change. Our first panelist is Emily Mcglynn. She's from the United States and with the Ecological Institute. She studies the novel liability framework for alternative emissions reductions. We have Fred Emile from France. He's a member of Greenpeace, and he studies the economic rules of international rainforest wood trade. Veryl Obodi from Kenya. She's a student at Moi University and writing her final year report on climate change impacts and birds of prey. And finally, Audrey Yank from Canada. She developed a system of harvesting energy from agricultural waste to decrease deforestation. So I will turn the floor over to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Marielle. I'm Emily Mcglynn. I'm from the US, and today I'll be talking about a research project that I've been working on with another colleague, Phil Hannum, who could not be here today. I first would like to thank all the other panelists for coming in today and participating in this event with us. I think their stories are really inspirational and incredible, and they've come from all around the world to be here. So I hope you'll take the time to talk to them afterwards and to all the young people throughout the conference. So regarding my research, Phil Hannum and I started this project after having attended COP15 last year together in Copenhagen, and we witnessed a lot of moving pieces in the negotiations as demonstrated through these pictures. A lot of moving pieces, but very little direction. So as I'll highlight, the UNFCCC negotiations are stalling. We're moving away from science-based targets. Proposals like that put forth by Brazil in 1997 have long been abandoned, and other efforts to structure top-down assignments of emissions reductions. Furthermore, the framework that we have now come to see as the norm in the negotiations, that volunteered emissions reductions, such as under the Copenhagen Accord, are not nearly enough to meet the targets that we need to sustain our planet. So you'll notice there are a few problems. The current negotiating texts are not connecting the various drivers of climate change, making it very difficult to come up with an agreement. And there's also a lack of political will and ambition, as made evident by the lack of science-based targets. There is no basis for a framework for determining emissions reduction burden sharing in the negotiations as they stand now. So my research with Phil Hannum seeks to address this. We have developed a benefit-based framework, theoretical framework for considering multiple drivers of climate change within one theoretical structure. And I'll try to explain that as I go through a couple of examples of how this framework works. We build upon the Brazil proposal here, which historically and famously suggested that countries' emissions reduction burdens be based upon their historical emissions. We, however, posit that this is overly simplistic, and we have to account for multiple drivers, past, present, and future sources of emissions and impacts. So how does this framework help us to do that? We consider two novel criteria. Under this framework, we consider benefit received from actions resulting in climate impacts, as well as potential for future impacts of climate change. The framework considers the time frame during which the perceived benefit occurred and the actions resulting in impact. This allows us to consider past, present, and future actions resulting in climate impacts. So I'll just go through a couple of examples because this is a rather complicated idea, and we could be discussing the implications for hours, but hopefully I'll give you a sense of what we can do. Just to quickly note, Party A and Party B can be either the same or different entities. So if we think about Party A being a present individual in the United States, thinking within the framework of historical emissions, who should be liable for the historical emissions of the United States? A present individual in the United States had no say or influence in the emissions that occurred in previous generations. However, the individuals in the U.S. today nevertheless benefit from the economic development that occurred as a result of the actions that now result in climate impacts. So, under this framework, we would consider Party A, an individual in the present U.S., to be indirectly liable for the past emissions of United States citizens. To use another example of trade, for example, which is another sector that is implicated under this framework. Party A can again be the U.S. The U.S. imports a lot of goods from other countries, for example, China, and yet there is no framework in place for the U.S. to be held responsible for the emissions resulting in China for the products that are then imported to the U.S. So under this framework, the U.S. would be indirectly liable for the present emissions of China, which are a result of production of exported goods to the U.S. However, since China also gains benefit from this trade, they would also be held liable. So obviously there's a lot of implications of this framework that I would love to discuss with anyone who's interested afterwards. These are some brief research highlights that I've tried to showcase. I have some full-length papers with me that I can share with you if you're interested, and if you give me your card, I can also email you a full-length paper. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Audrey, and I'm from Montreal in Canada. I'm here with the Canadian Youth Delegation, and I will present you a summer research project that I did in Benin in West Africa. So first of all, when we arrived there, we decided to, consult the local population and see what were the different issues to tackle these issues. So we developed an alternative energy to replace wood in the traditional stoves. So first of all, Benin produces a lot of rice, like different other West African countries, and there's a lot of residues from the husk after the rice has been milled. There's also the issue of deforestation because all the women in the village traditionally use fuel. 93% of the fuel used in rural villages in West Africa is wood. So it's okay to say let's try not to cut wood, but then we have to give a different alternative. So we decided to tackle this issue. There's a high fuel demand for wood, especially for different activities, parboiling, for example, which needs a lot of wood. And then the stoves, which are made of clay, have also low efficiency. So the objective was to develop a method to process the rice husk into an alternative fuel. It was also to valorize these rice milling byproducts, to do something else with it instead of just letting them pile up. And we decided to also improve the energy efficiency of traditional stoves and reduce the overall wood consumption and reduce the pressure on the forest. So we designed a briquetting machine with local material to be able to press the rice husk into briquettes. So this is a picture of what our press looked like. And you also see in the boxes what was the result of the rice husk once compressed. We also have a picture of the wood that we used to compress these briquettes. The process overall is to mix this rice husk with a binder, mostly water, and then compress it with the lever, let it dry, and then once the moisture content is decreased, it can then be burnt into the traditional stove, just like wood. For the traditional stove, the traditional stove are mostly three bumps of clay, so very low efficient because there's a lot of loss of heat. So we wanted to increase the heat transfer and to increase the efficiency of the stove. So with the local women, we try to see what would be an alternative design using the same materials, so we stayed with the clay. So that's the design that we came up with to try to keep more of the heat for the better combustion of the fuel. So our result, well, we decreased the cost in the fuel because fuel during this wet season has to be bought by the women. For 5 kilograms of wood, we were able to produce, for the same amount of money, we can get 5 kilograms of wood. Well, for the same amount, we were able to produce 12 kilograms of briquette. So this is an economic advantage for the local villagers. Also, we doubled the efficiency of the stoves. We were able to assess the efficiency of the stoves initially to be about 6%, and we doubled it to 12%. But one of the major results or the major goals was also to empower the women, because this was a solution to empower the women into these villages and give them some activity that are producing more money, because, for example, women are really involved in rice culture, but unfortunately they're not necessarily involved in the steps that are bringing them more money. So that briquette production could be a solution to empower women for production and sell these briquettes at the market. So in general, these are the ideas of our project. Thank you very much for listening to the presentation today.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Veri Lobodi from Kenya. I'm a student at Moi University, started doing my senior project on the impact of climate change on birds of prey. I'm going to talk about how raptors really help to control global warming. We realize birds are actually the greatest indicators of climate change. And if we don't really get to conserve some of these birds, then we're probably going to have to lose a lot in regard to, climate change. One, I'm going to talk about how raptors really help in controlling global warming. We realize that they provide an early warning for humans, especially during their migrations. This is notifiable in the sense that during the migration trends, you realize if this happens unexpectedly, if this happens during the months when they're not due to migrate, you'll probably realize there's going to be a problem in regard to climate change. And I'm also going to talk about how raptors also help in controlling global warming. Large raptors such as the forest eagles help maintain the balance of nature. You realize that the top predators in the food webs and the food chains. So when they get to feed on the various prey, it kind of clears up the entire natural ecosystem, hence enabling a balanced ecosystem. They also help detect poisonous gases since they are sensitive to many forms of environmental change, including chemical pollution. This is basically used a lot more by the coal miners, because once they detect the birds' movements around, they're going to get to realize that they're probably releasing lots of negative gases into the atmosphere, hence probably finds a way forward. How climate change has impacted on raptors? We realize that climate change causes loss of habitats. When habitat is lost, these birds are definitely going to be affected, because you realize, one, they cannot survive, they cannot cope with the changing habitat, with the various change of habitat, thus leading to their deaths and probably low survival rates, then it also leads to the decline in certain species. I'm going to take a very good example of the African marsh harrier. This particular bird has not been spotted in the past 10 years, and we could definitely rule this into having been caused by climate change. It has also altered their movement and feeding ecology. We realize once habitats have been destructed, then definitely their feeding ecology is going to be changed, and so are the movement, and so are their movement. A way forward. I'd recommend as a young climate scientist that we sensitize and educate the public on the importance of conserving birds, because they not only are the greatest indicators of climate change, but they also help a lot in regard to our ecosystems. Then, if you also promote bird watching, this is going to be a way forward to also helping enabling people around the world and around the globe to realize the importance of doing all this so that we find a way forward for global warming. Thank you.
Good morning. Obviously, the slides are mixed up. No problem. I'm Frederic from France. I'm working for the youth program of Greenpeace called Solar Generation, and I'm also a part of it, conducting research for a PhD on economy on the international trade of rainforest wood. The main objective of this research is to try to use international trade of rainforest wood as a case study for including in economy and market mechanism the price of environment and social cost of production of resources and harvesting of resources. Where we are today is in the price of food at the international level. If you take a boat of wood that is coming from, let's say, Democratic Republic of Congo or Brazil going to North America or Europe, the price of the wood when it's sold in Europe is a part of the logging cost on the ground, a part of taxes that are paid to leave the country of production, and a part of the taxes that are paid to enter the country of selling, the international capital gain of the lobbying company, and the transportation, obviously. What should be in the price of cost of wood if you want it to get sustainable and participate in the conservation of rainforest should be a logging cost increased so that the people, the local people that actually cut the trees get a fair amount for their work. The taxes should be clearly raised up so that the countries of production benefit of the selling of their natural resources abroad. The international capital gain should be lowered because it's well, that's the part of my economic research about history of economy and the theory from Aristotle that say that the capital gain in the trade should be lowered at the maximum so that the world trading mechanism benefit to everybody. Transportation stays the same. Patrimonial value is what we try to get an average of. We are working with anthropologists and sociologists to know how we can implement a way to value patrimonial, psychological attachment of people for forest. That's the second part of the work. And when you get to know what's the main word that people use to describe forest, the rainforest communities talk about heritage, the logging companies talk about resources, and the consumer talk about wildness or nature. That's very interesting because we see that rainforest is not the same for everybody, and that as rainforest is not considered to be the same things for everybody in the way of trade, we can't find a real agreement on what should be the definition of the price of the wood. What we're trying to do is to get to know this better and propose a new way to implement prices for rainforest wood. Thank you.
We can now take questions.
But I had a question about your work on cook stoves, and I was wondering if, because it's become a big initiative from the State Department now in the U.S. to promote cook stoves, and I was wondering if you had any pushback from the local community on the way that the cook stoves affected the cooking process, and if it took longer, or if that if that jived with the way that they were used to the traditional way of cooking, and where the briquettes were sold as compared to where they collected the firewood, and if that sort of shortened their time in collection.
So concerning the stove, actually it decreased the time of cooking for some, especially the parboiling activities, which is a process that usually takes about half an hour. So it decreased the time of this activity. It also decreased by quite a lot the amount of fuel necessary, because you didn't need as much wood because it would keep more the heat. And because it was the same principle, the same, like, you still put the cauldron on top, it didn't really change the way they had to cook. So it was really well accepted, and the women saw the amount of wood that it could save. So they were really inclined to adopt this design. And for the briquettes, one of the ideas was also to decrease the time of collecting the wood, because of deforestation, women have to walk farther and further. So this was also a good advantage for them, because they see that they could stay in the village to produce the briquettes, and they could sell it at the market.
Yes. So I had a question for any one of you who was interested in taking this. And it's, given that there's been a lot of controversy recently about sort of the state and quality of climate science, whether that's warranted controversy or not, what motivates you all, or any one of you, to keep doing climate change research in spite of, some opposition by someone out there?
I guess what's motivating every researcher is the seek for knowledge, and that's what we're doing basically, and what climate scientists are doing. They're just trying to understand what's happening, and we don't aim at anything apart of understanding and know.
In response to the same question, I'd say, because everyone else is talking about climate change, what motivated me most was to come up with something unique. So that's what I decided to carry out a research on impacts of climate change on birds of prey. Yeah.
And if I can add something, I would say hope. It's our future. It's us that we're going to be subjected to all the climate change impacts. So I guess it's to be part of a solution and to try to do something to change the situation.
I agree. I think we all have come to realize that it's one of the most pressing problems of our time, and it's a very strong drive to get involved in this community, in the climate science community, and try to help come up with solutions. I think that's an incredible driving force, and it's ultimately very fulfilling, and it can be fun.
Hi, I have two related questions. The first one is, basically, as a young scientist, do you feel included in the general climate scientific community? And also, relating to that, one of the issues that's facing the United States in general is that a lot of the youth aren't choosing to invest themselves in science. And what do you feel needs to happen in your own personal communities for more young people to choose science as a career path?
I guess just quickly, I think I personally have been able to find support from advisors and senior climate scientists, but you have to push. You have to push to get there, and you have to not be afraid to present more perhaps creative ideas that might not be immediately welcome to people who are highly established in the field. And I would just encourage people to not be afraid to really be creative and push for their ideas to be heard.
I would say that one of the reasons why we don't necessarily feel included as much is because it's not known. So this is one of the reasons why we're here today, to speak up and to show how youth have potential and how we can be involved as well. We have a lot of good ideas also, and we can see these good examples of how we can bring something to the climate science as well.
All right, that concludes our presentation. If we could give a round of applause to our fabulous presenters. And thank you all for attending.